So I just finished watching season 1 of Luke Cage, the latest Marvel and Netflix series. I did a review of the very first episode to just track my initial thoughts about the series, where it was going, the tone, the feel of it. So that would be a great companion piece to watch before you watch this review. In this review, my review itself is going to be totally spoiler-free, so I'm going to put spoiler-free review up at the top of the screen. Then what I'm going to do is put spoiler talk at the end, and I want to talk some spoilers and some changes I would have made, what I kind of thought about some things on a level that I can't really discuss without getting into spoilers, because there's a number of plot twists in here and elements that really affect the story, and I don't want to ruin that for you if you haven't watched it yet. So in Luke Cage, the title character is trying to live a low-key life, just working at a barber shop, he's working in a kitchen at a club, and doesn't want to use the superpowers that we learn he has very early on. But he's in a community where there's corrupt politicians, there's corrupt club owners, there's corrupt police officers, there's a lot of corruption going on. So the regular people that he's interacting with, that he cares about, that he wants to protect, find themselves kind of wrapped up in some bad stuff. And you can just see in the first couple of episodes the dominoes being set up of how this is all going to work. And this story is very much a story that deals with a community and how people are interconnected with one another and how they care when something happens to someone in their life. Starting off talking about the good, I think one thing that really works about this show is that Luke Cage, the character and the actor, are the most just kind of charismatic and likable of the lead characters of these Marvel Netflix series. Like with Daredevil, he's just kind of too brooding. Inherently, the type of person that he is and what he's doing, he pushes people away. Jessica Jones is very damaged from the events that happened before the series started that you learn about as the series unfolds. And so you understand why she's kind of sheltered and holds people at bay and is just so sassy and kind of rude to other people. But because she's like that, she doesn't come off super charismatic, super likable. As opposed to Luke Cage, who very much from the get-go, he comes off like a very likable, cool, charismatic guy. And very much like the other Netflix series, it once again establishes that you can build tension, you can have stakes the audience cares about without it having to be, we're gonna blow up the city, we've got a bomb that's gonna blow everything up, we've got poison that's gonna... You don't have to do that. You can just have individual characters, a community, a building that you care about, that you actually are invested in them and don't want them to die. You don't want bad things to happen to them or this community. Therefore, you care about what's going on without it having to be, 1 million people will die. Earth is at risk. No, you just have to have things you care about. Even if it's one person you care about, you can build stakes surrounding that, and this show gets that, and it does it wonderfully. So the season has 4 main villains, and I'll talk about that a little bit in the bad, but 2 of them, who are cousins, are very well handled in that you actually care about them. And as you're watching kind of their world unfold, you both appreciate the fact that Luke Cage is going after him, trying to stop them, but in other elements of what they're trying to do, you're kind of like, you feel bad, like, ooh, like, they're despicable, bad people, but that's not what ties to what happened here, and they're not to blame actually for this. And you can see all these different pieces to where they didn't fully do the thing that caused all the consequences that are being heaped upon them, so you feel bad about them. And that's what a good villain is, that you understand their perspective, their worldview, their actions. And while you don't want them to just be this mustache-twirling villain that's super evil and you just want the bad guy to take him out, you want to be able to relate to them and have some sympathy and empathy for them. And here you have that, where you absolutely want Luke Cage to tear them down, while at the same time being like, ooh, this kind of hurts a little bit because they're not to blame for all of that stuff. One of the things the show does very well is tackle timely issues in a very appropriate manner. It's proper allegory, but it's proper kind of also at times directly addressing things. Naturally, you've got a TV show where the lead character is a black man who wears a black hoodie in Harlem and has police issues. Clearly, they're addressing major issues going on in our culture right now that need to be addressed, that need to be talked about. And this is a very appropriate and good way to do it, and a great context to do it. Because it tells a story from the perspective of a black man in Harlem and what he's dealing with. And it tells in a way that's entertaining. It doesn't come off preachy. Luke Cage doesn't stand up to a microphone and start preaching anything at the audience. It tells a story from a perspective so you can understand and relate to a character in a situation. That's how you get people outside of a context to understand where you're coming from and give us something to relate to. And this does it very well. It tells a very engaging story that's very enjoyable, while tackling things that really matter. 2 more things on the good side. There's a lot of MCU connections. They make a lot of references throughout the entire season to kind of the bigger picture of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that doesn't just come off super winky. It comes off very much like the conversations that would be going on if you live in Harlem and someone in Harlem has superpowers and there's all these stories on the news about Thor and Captain America. People would be comparing this guy to them. And that's what you see throughout the season. And likewise, you see characters kind of like afraid and like, how do we stop one of these superhero people? Now we've got one in our own community. That's the appropriate and right way to do it. And finally, I just want to comment on the music. The music in it is so cool. Feels like it's such a throwback to the 70s in a perfect way while sounding modern, while sounding very retro, vintage. Really enjoyed the music in it and just the way to like kick in at just the right moments to kind of amp up what's going on. Very unique score, but fits perfectly for the type of show this is naturally. So as I mentioned before, the season has 4 main villains. You've got Cottonmouth, you've got Dimebag, you've got the politician lady, and you've got Shades. And they're not all handled equally good, and we don't necessarily need all 4 of them in this season. And at times it feels like we pushed people out when we should have kept them in, and we brought people in that didn't necessarily feel like they needed to be there. And so the way it all fits together isn't so great. And really, of the 4, 3 of them are really interesting to me, and one of them's not interesting at all and isn't handled very well at all. When it comes to the 4 of them, 3 of them come off very impulsive and stupid at times throughout the season, where you're just watching it being like, no, you're going to get caught. Like, no, you can't just recklessly do stuff and expect to get away with it. Now, one of them, on the plus side to it, doesn't come off like that. He comes off intentional, methodical, thinking through what's going to happen. And whenever they're about to do something stupid, he's kind of the voice of reason in which you go, okay, like, but why do they keep doing the stupid stuff that's going to make things go really badly for them? You just think if you'd listen to this guy over here that's not being stupid, that you wouldn't have such a bad time. Like throughout the entire season, these main bad guys are just like popping off their henchmen whenever they do something stupid or mouth off or do the wrong thing. And you just watch it and you go, why would anyone be a henchman? Like, why would you trust these people? Also, kind of moving into the main bad guy as the season kind of moves towards an end and when they have the final tension and things escalate, it gets very comic booky and cartoonish in a way that just feels very out of place for the series that we've been watching up to that point, because it feels so grounded and it feels like a community with actual corrupt politicians and club owners running things along the side. And then so when you get to the end of it and it gets cartoonish and comic booky, it just feels like they're stepping too far. And I don't even know if I dislike that so much as thinking if they could have added in some of that comic booky camp earlier on, it would have had a more consistent tone throughout the season. But as it plays out, it was more kind of like, really? That's where this is going right now? Another problem that the season ran into was similar to Daredevil Season 2, where that Daredevil Season 2 started off with a main plot line. Around episode 4 or 5, they do a big shift and it transitions. And then from like 5 until like episode 10 is a new plot line. And then for like 10 through 13, they all tie together and all the elements come together and you go, oh, now I get where this is going. This season does that as well. You kind of set something up early on and that kind of plays out, transitions to another story, and then they all kind of come together towards the end. Well, very much like Daredevil Season 2 as well, around episodes 7, 8, 9, it just kind of starts to drag, and it's both seasons gave me that kind of vibe right around the exact same point in time in the season. In particular for this season, I felt like the plotline of the first 5 episodes had room to be kind of drawn out until like episode 9, really. And then that would have, you'd retweak entirely the last 4 episodes. But I think what was there, the world that was built in the beginning, had more episodes to tell stories. As I mentioned in my review of the first episode, which you should check out and click on that right there and go watch it. Gonna plug my own videos. Sorry, I got to. But in that, what I talked about is the very slow pacing and how the very first 30 minutes of this is only like 4 scenes kind of stretched out for a while. And then the season gets going and it's like they jumped forward too much and they wanted to progress things too much. And so there was all these stories you could have told about Luke Cage before things really got going. And it could have had this ongoing growing tension throughout the season as he's getting pulled in more and more and more, and there's more and more consequences. The way it unfolds, there's big gigantic, he gets pulled in very early on and there's big consequences very early on. And so I think there were more stories to tell if they just kind of taken that first world that they built before everything started getting blown to pieces and things got really crazy. Take that world where things are still stable and have more stories of Luke being the hero early on. And for a few kind of quick nitpicks about it, throughout the season there's kind of themes of trust and authority and power. And the way it kind of unfolds is that the villains always seem to be able to get away with being bad guys, and Luke Cage, who's a good guy, keeps getting in trouble for being a good guy. And if they'd done that a couple of times, it would have worked. But they kind of keep playing that same hand over and over again, that whenever bad guys get arrested, that they get right off. And anytime they set him up for something, the police believe it. Anytime he does something small that's illegal, it's just assumed there's something way worse going on. Anytime these bad guys do something horrific and awful, the police pay no attention to it. And it plays out so heavy-handed that the police are just dumb and don't trust Luke, but they trust these bad guys so much that to an extent, you kind of like, what? Why are the police this dumb? And why is it so easy for bad guys to get away with everything? Overall, I really enjoyed this season. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I liked the main character. I liked a lot of the side characters. Some of the villains were really good. But as things kind of went along, they introduced a few too many characters, they repeated a few too many tropes, the plot cheated a few too many times and treated the cops like they were too dumb a few too many times that I had a few problems with where it went. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I love this Marvel Netflix universe that they're building. And I mean, after watching this, I was really thinking, I hope that they bring Luke Cage in somewhere into the MCU and actually do something with him. They've definitely built the pieces to where they could do that, do some really cool things with it. But I really enjoyed it. There's some story and character problems, but there's also some great story and character elements in here. So that's what I thought about it. With that, I'm going to keep talking in a spoiler section. If you haven't watched it yet, don't watch the rest of this video. Please come back and watch it at a later time. So moving forward, spoiler talk. So speaking of spoilers, I'll do a real superficial one real quick, and then I'm going to talk about some deeper plot stuff after that. But I actually was almost expecting Tony Stark to show up at the last 15 minutes of the episode. Now, I knew it wouldn't happen. I know that they try and keep him distant. At the same time, I was thinking, well, that would be so mind-blowing, and they built a set of circumstances that it only makes sense that Tony Stark would show up. So throughout the whole season, there keeps being released footage, released stories about Luke Cage being the superpowered guy that can't get hurt in Harlem. Well, just a few months back, we saw in Civil War, there's a guy in New York City who swings around with webs shooting out of his hands, and Tony Stark showed up at his apartment and figured that one out without having him on the news saying, I'm Luke Cage. And so it only would have made sense that Tony Stark would be interested in who this guy is to show up to talk to him, invite him into this Avengers Initiative thing. So I really was expecting something a little bit more. I know why they didn't do it. At the same time, the way they've built that up and the way they treated Spider-Man really set it up for Tony Stark to make an appearance right there at the end, or at least have someone from S.H.I.E.L.D. show up and be like, hey, would you be interested in to talk to us about something? That would have been so cool. It would have really tied some things together in a neat way and made sense with the story that they told and the story that the MCU has been telling. So with all that said, in the spoiler talk, what I really want to talk about is the Dimebag plotline. I didn't think it worked really at all. As a character, he just came off like the mustache-twirling villain that all of the other main villains weren't. So Cottonmouth was this businessman. You could see where he was coming from, that he's going to dip his toe into evil. He's going to sell guns to make money, but he's going to build a name for himself, do something what no one's ever done before in Harlem. He's got a cousin who's a politician who's doing things that no one's ever done in Harlem. And so you understand where they're coming from. Shades is like the career henchman guy, and so he's going to do whatever he needs to do. You understand where he's coming from. He's not just super evil, flying off the handle, killing people, but he will kill people when he needs to. And then we get to Dimebag. He comes in, and it's just like he's running around trying to kill Luke Cage flippantly, and they try and give depth to him, make him seem smart by having him quote the Bible and having quote this book, The 40 Laws of Power or something like that. But what he's doing comes off so stupid and reckless that you can't like understand where he's coming from. There's a nightclub filled with people, and he starts shooting a police officer in front of all of them, and and then takes everyone hostage. And the only reason you can get away with this is if the screenwriters write it off and say they get away with it. Otherwise, it's clear you're going to get caught. Luke Cage is only seen by anyone running out, protecting people, and then he's gone. And then all of the hostages leave and they're like, no, it wasn't Luke Cage, it was someone else. But because of the story has to make it so that Dimebag can get away with things and things like that, that's the only reason he gets away with it. But as a character, he does so many reckless, foolish things that make no sense whatsoever. And likewise, the script even mentions some of this stuff in there where it has the character at one point in time say, hey, the heads of all of these gangs and crime syndicates have been killed, but no one's paying attention just because everyone's focusing on Luke Cage. And that person says that, and you go, yeah, that makes absolutely no sense. And the only reason they wrote it into the screenplay or this teleplay is because they have to say it to acknowledge the problem with the story they're telling. Because that makes no sense that the police would be so blind to like, wait, who's capping all these other people that are really powerful? Like, why isn't a full-on gang war started? Why haven't all these things happened? Why aren't the police worried about any of that? Oh, they're only focused on this one character because the story has to be just focused on this one character. And so much of that just ties back to they kind of forced Dimebag into it, and he's doing so many dumb and reckless things his whole time that he's on the show that it's just not very enjoyable. And along those same lines, the story and those elements seem to lose a lot of their weight and momentum whenever the big plot twist happens and Cottonmouth gets killed. So I wasn't expecting that at all. I assumed he was going to be like the kingpin of this show and he was going to run throughout the whole thing because he was being established as a very similar type of character. And then he's killed off very suddenly. And that's where things kind of shift and change. And I don't even mind that they killed him off or that they had that kind of like shocking of a twist. But because it happened so early in the season, they had to have someone fill that void and they put Dimebag in. And at that point in time, all the momentum just kind of is lost. And so the episodes right after that are some of the most action-packed. It's where you discover that Luke Cage is vulnerable. You see him hurt and on the run. You see him on the run from the police. But we don't care as much because we don't care about who this Dimebag guy is. And he just seems so just pointlessly evil and foolish that why would we care about what he's doing? Whereas before we had villains that we actually cared about. And as Cottonmouth, all his world is falling apart. You feel bad for him because like he's mad that Pop's got killed too. Like he's just as frustrated about that and killed someone over it. That's what Luke Cage is mad about. And that's why he's trying to take him down. And he wasn't even fully responsible for what happened with that. And so that's interesting. There's multiple levels to it. There's depth of character where you really care, whereas Dimebag, you're like, wait, they're brothers, and he's mad because they're brothers, because he's the bastard son that was forgotten. What? Like, why is he so mad? Why is he so reckless and foolish and just kind of tearing everything to the ground, burning everything to the ground? I don't understand where this is coming from. So if I could take the elements that they put in there and change it, here's what I would do. First off, I would kind of work in the idea of Avengers paranoia that's a little bit sprinkled throughout the season very early on. It's just kind of the zeitgeist of the community and the city and the world as a whole. Is everyone is afraid because aliens come from the sky and superheroes come out of nowhere, and we don't know where all these superheroes are coming from. You don't know whether they're the good guy or the bad guy. We're just afraid, and everyone feels helpless and powerless because there's these people coming out of anywhere. So right off the bat, let's just put that in there as an element that's very heavily weighing on the whole season. And so for that reason, Luke Cage is trying to keep low key, and it puts more weight to what he's already doing. He wants to stay low-key throughout this whole thing, but you add to it, he's afraid because he doesn't want to be treated like a crazy person or a super-powered person that might be all these other things. And that's kind of in there a little bit, but it would be more powerful if there was a very clear, heavy point that everyone's afraid of these new Avengers and these new alien villains that keep showing up. So with all that in mind, what I would do is I would take Politician Lady and Cottonmouth, and I would kind of stretch out their storyline that you saw in the first 5-ish episodes and stretch that out to like episode 7 or 8. You don't have Cottonmouth die until episode 8 or 9, up until right that final stretch. He's alive, and what you have instead is have Politician Lady, someone that's genuinely trying to help her community, and she's just willing to do illegal and shady things to make it happen. So maybe throughout the whole thing, she's doing some program that she's working really hard to make happen that will be better for the community. The people really love her for this program she's trying to do. And so then when Luke Cage does things to try and stop her, it hurts the community in a sense. So there's a drama there. There's a real tension because he's trying to stop someone evil, but the evil person's trying to do something good. And so likewise, you have Cottonmouth as someone that's not fully evil. He's trying to better the community for black people and build a name for himself and do a whole bunch of really good things. And he's connected to a politician who's very loved in the community and very powerful in the community, and really make the point throughout the whole thing that instead of it being that the politician lady's dragged down by being connected to Cottonmouth, Cottonmouth is pulled up by being connected to her. And so Luke Cage can't just go out and attack them without seeming like he's attacking legitimate businesses and business people. So you build a real tension in that by having characters that are evil doing good things and a good person trying to stop evil people that ends up stopping good things from happening. There's a lot of real tension in that, and ideologies conflicting and all sorts of tension in that makes for great drama. Another thing that could have really helped is having that alien technology, that alien bullets and stuff, factor in much earlier on. So have alien bullets, have alien knives, alien bats, something like that. And so like in episode 2, Luke goes and attacks one of these arms places and just takes it out easily. And maybe that's even one of the main plot lines early on, is that Cottonmouth is getting into smuggling these alien weapons. And so he's got these highly powerful alien weapons that no one else has. And that's some of the central plot line that's driven in this, that Luke has to stop that from happening, but it's the one thing that can stop him. And so then episode 2, he stops them easily. Episode 3, he goes into a place and Cottonmouth has put someone there with an alien gun thing, or the technology that Dimebag uses at the end of the episode. Something like that. So very early on, there's someone or something that is a threat to Luke Cage. And then that can also become a MacGuffin around episodes 7 through 8, where they're trying to get more of this stuff to be able to kill him. He's trying to get it to stop them. Something like that, perhaps. To give a quick outline of what I would have done, I would say keep episode 1 through 3. Luke Cage is very low-key throughout all of that. So people don't know who he is. His name isn't ringing out throughout the community. He's just stopping small-level stuff. We're getting some cool action, getting to know him and why he isn't getting involved and why he is getting involved. And we get to know Pops a little bit more and understand him as the center of the community, that everybody loves him and has a long history with him. And then likewise, you start getting the plot that unfolded in episodes 2 and 3, have that happen around 4, 5, and 6. And so you get this big politician lady having some sort of program going on, big stuff going on, and then Luke Cage really starts to mess with it around episode 4, and there's a back and forth with them, with their struggles, and things really kind of start collapsing of their reign as pillars of the community around episodes 7 and 8. And so then Cottonmouth gets killed at episode 9, but by this point in time, we've fully established that politician lady's loved by the community. Cottonmouth is loved by the community. So Luke Cage comes off like the crazy man when he's set up because he killed them. And we've already well established that there's these weapons. And so then politician lady, who's connected to Cottonmouth, who has these weapons, gives them to the police. So our final stretch of it is them coming after him, not for so long that it gets dragged out that you forget that there's this tension, but just enough right there at the end that there's high stakes, high tension as he's on the run, trying to prove his name, trying to stop these other big bad guys. And maybe you have Dimebag in here, but he's more of like the muscle in the season. He's not the main bad guy that has all these connections to Luke Cage that they don't really have time to explore to give motive to. He's just a guy that's kind of like where Shades is the smart guy that's playing things smart. Dimebag is just the muscle that's got these bullets, and I'm going to go kill this guy because I was told to go kill this guy. He beat me in episode 4. Well, I'm going to make sure in episode 12 that I get him dead. You know, something like that. To where he has a role, but he's not the role that he had in it, where it just seems so forced, trying to have an emotional weight to it. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on the first season of Luke Cage. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very good. It wasn't quite great because they didn't take full advantage of some of the plot lines and some of the characters. They could have done a lot more with the politician lady and Cottonmouth and dragged that out longer in the right way of dragging it out. Whereas here it just felt rushed and we didn't get to see them as powerful in the community as perhaps they could have been. So what do you think about Luke Cage? Tell me in the comment section what you think, because I don't want to just talk about TV. I want to talk about it with you. So please comment in the comment section. Let's have a great conversation about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this season. Thank you so much for watching. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, please consider clicking that subscribe button to hear my thoughts on all kinds of other TV shows and movies. Thank you so much for watching.